Senior day against Vanderbilt went according to plan for the Kentucky Wildcats. From the slow start to the final score, everything was as expected for Big Blue Nation.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, writer for various SEC-related things, but on this podcast, we are taking a dive into all things Kentucky athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be recapping the Kentucky Wildcats' 93-77 win over the Vanderbilt Commodores. Everything was just about as expected here in this senior day matchup. We kind of hit the nail on the head, you and I, on all of these different things that occurred in this game. Going to break down the good, the bad. Looking forward to the final game of the season here on this recap episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. I want to remind everyone that we are free and available on all different platforms out there, podcast and YouTube as well. Whether you are tuned in on podcast or on the YouTube channel, please subscribe to the show if you are new. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. 93-77 was the final score. Wildcats improved to 12-5 in the SEC, 12-5 alongside three other teams. So there is a four-way tie right now for second place in the SEC. Unfortunately, Tennessee, with their win over South Carolina, wins the SEC regular season title outright. First time they've done that since the 2007-08 season. But Kentucky can get as close to as the 2 seed if things shake out according to plan on Saturday. But this game here was the step in the right direction, 93-77 victory over the Commodores. You and I talked about this in the preview episode, about how Vanderbilt was going to come into this game and they were going to make it competitive. And they did for an entire, I would say, half and change. They made this one really, really close on the Wildcats. And for a moment there, it felt like it was going to be like the Arkansas game, right? Where we were just going to see these teams go back and forth, trade bucket for bucket for bucket for bucket for the entire game until we saw them both end up in the 90s or maybe even up in the hundreds by the time this was all said and done. But Vanderbilt slowed down a little bit. Kentucky was able to do some things on defense to create some havoc, and they were able to establish themselves consistently from outside the arc in the second period of the game, and they just kind of took it and ran. And in that preview episode where we discussed, Vanderbilt has the guard play, they have the ability to kind of make things tough on Kentucky, despite the fact that statistically, they are just awful. The Commodores are at just about everything. We said that this game had the ability to be close, and that's why I was so concerned about it being a potential trap game, because this time last year, Kentucky was going to go on the road and play a difficult opponent, Arkansas, to end the season, and they played Vanderbilt at home before that, and they lost, I believe, by 2 points. And in this game, an even worse Vanderbilt squad, I was even more afraid because of this team's chaotic nature, of Kentucky's chaotic nature, I should say. They're up and down, and sometimes they don't quite get up for games like this against Arkansas, like we saw last week, like this one against Vanderbilt for a half, where Kentucky just kind of was sleepwalking on defense, as they tend to do from time to time, but they really did wake up and I think clamp down on some things in the second half. It ended up holding the Commodores to just 2 of 15 shooting from outside the arc in the second period of play, 37.8% from the floor. So a lot of different positives, I think, to take away from this one, as it just kind of went as we predicted. I predicted Kentucky to win this game by 15. They ended up doing that. I said 90-75 or 91-75. I ended up doing that. The first thing I want to mention here about the way that this one kind of shook out, if we're just going to talk about, before we get into the individual players, if we're just going to talk about how this one played out, is that first half. In the first half, Vanderbilt ended up shooting, if I'm not mistaken, 53.1% from the floor, 37.5% from three, and they just kind of took it to Kentucky at various points from various angles. They were knocking down some threes in transition. They were doing a couple of different things at the paint, inside the paint, where guys like Ugonna Onyenso and Aaron Bradshaw just were not able to consistently defend. Vanderbilt's offense, as I have said, is not going to pass the rock around a ton. I'm not a huge fan of some of the things that Stackhouse likes to run as far as his sets go, but if he has the right personnel and he's got a couple of guards that can really handle the basketball, they can light up a team from time to time. They may not win the game, but at least they've got some things going on offense where they've got players that can create in isolation, and they certainly did that in the first half. They also passed the rock around a little bit in the first half, which was uncharacteristic. Ezra Mannion in that first half had 6 assists. The team as a total had 8. In the second half, it's where things really started to differentiate for the Commodores. But that first half did not shock me at all. And when you look at Kentucky and the way that they played so far this season, that's just kind of been their MO, is to come out in the first half, have a little bit of a sluggish start against teams like this, and then they're able to kind of rally, kind of able to put some things together in that second period of play and just kind of take over the game at some point because of just how good their offense is. And teams just normally can't keep up unless Kentucky continues to give them opportunities on defense. This win went just about as we thought it would. So Kentucky basketball, again, 12-5 in the SEC now. If they can get to that 2 seed in the SEC tournament, I would be super, super happy with that. As it looks right now, it's going to be difficult for Kentucky to get there because of the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, Auburn plays Georgia, Alabama for their final game of the season. I believe, they play Arkansas. So those are 2 teams that are probably going to improve to 13-5 in the SEC. And then you've got South Carolina at 12-5 as well, going to play at Mississippi State. So if State if State beats Kentucky, then you will end up in that 4 seed spot, if I'm not mistaken. So Kentucky's got a chance here to finish as high as 2, as low as a 5 seed. And it started with a solid victory here tonight. So we'll dive into some of the other things that we saw in this game outside of the first half slump in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. Let's say this weekend, for the final game of the regular season, you want to head to Knoxville, you want to go see Kentucky take on the Vols and possibly get a 2 seed in the SEC tournament. Well, there is only one place that you need to go for tickets, and it is Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event like this one between UT and UK, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sporting, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. They take the guesswork out of buying tickets, and they've got the Game Time guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. So if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I used Game Time quite a bit this past college football season, got some really awesome last-second deals and some really, really nice seats, I might add, at various college football venues across the Southeast, and I absolutely love using them. Would highly encourage you guys to go check them out. All you have to do to take the guesswork out of buying tickets is go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you can create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you again. If you have not checked out the show, subscribe to the show, I should say. Would really appreciate it if you went ahead and did that. If you were listening on podcast, wherever you are tuned in, sub up. It would be much appreciated. Going to be a really fun SEC tournament, fun March Madness tournament. It's that time of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe it is already March. I'm so excited to see what unfolds for Kentucky. Subscribe today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Give me your thoughts on this game as well as the future contests in the comments below. So 93-77 was the final score here. Wildcats victorious over the Vanderbilt Commodores on Senior Day. Love to see Kareem Watkins get in there for a minute at the beginning of the game. Got himself a rebound. Really exciting to see him go out and start here in his final game in Rupp Arena Really awesome to see that. Rob Dillingham is the first player I want to get to here as far as players that impressed in this contest. Dillingham went off against Vanderbilt in the first go-round. He had 20 points and 9 assists, and I think he hit 4 threes. In this game, 23 points on 9 of 15 shooting, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. He had 5 assists, a couple of rebounds, solid in just 26 minutes. Solid guard play off the bench. Rob Dillingham will give you that just about 4 nights out of 5, and this was one of those 4 nights out of 5. It's, again, Kentucky, they do so many different things well on offense, and it starts and ends with those 4 guards that they've got. Reeves, Dillingham, Sheppard, Wagner. And as I've continued to say, when you match up with Kentucky, those are the 4 guys you're going to be looking at. Those are the 4 guys that you're really going to have to pay attention to. If you are going to have a chance, is what I've continued to say. If you're going to have a chance, you have to try and shut down at least 2 of them. If you can't shut down at least 2 of those guards, you're going to have a hard time trying to win the game. If you can't shut down all 4 of them and they're all shooting efficiently, it's just going to be a really long night, and you're going to give up a ton of points, and if you aren't able to keep up, Kentucky will blow you out of the water. Now, the blowout has not happened a ton this season, but it has happened on occasion and sometimes against some really good teams like Alabama. But tonight, Rob Dillingham led the way with 23 points in scoring. By the way, Tyron Lawrence of Vanderbilt also had 23 points on 9 of 14 shooting, had 9 rebounds, and a couple of assists as well. But Kentucky's guards, on the whole, played pretty dang well. Antonio Reeves, 20 points, 8 of 17 shooting, had 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Continue to say about Antonio Reeves, he is doing more than just scoring the basketball, and he's doing a lot more than just taking threes. He has developed his game, and he looks so good compared to where he was a season ago. It is so impressive, the development that he has had. Also, speaking of development, let's talk for a second about DJ Wagner, who, for the majority of the season, has really struggled with his outside shot. If I'm not mistaken, he went almost a month, without hitting a three-pointer. And over these past few games, he is shooting lights out. I think he's 11 of 15 over his past 3 games from beyond the arc. 11 points today, 4 of 8 from the floor, 3 of 5 from deep. He had 4 rebounds, 5 assists to just 1 turnover in 24 minutes of play. Your starting lead guard, DJ Wagner. If he is shooting and distributing like that, it is going to be almost impossible to hold Kentucky underneath 90 points a game. Almost impossible. Very impressed. Reeves, Wagner, Dillingham. And then, oh, by the way, Reed Sheppard, who only had 8 points and was 3 of 6 from the floor, had 4 rebounds and 11 assists, which is a career high. Just calmly, oh, yeah, by the way, if you can't stop the 2 20-point scorers, and then Wagner, who had 5 assists and was 3 of 5 from 3, try stopping Sheppard, who came off the bench and dished the ball out 11 different times for buckets. Kentucky had 27 assists to 10 turnovers in this one. It's just like what do you do to shut down the Kentucky offense? You can't do it. It is near impossible to hold Kentucky for an entire game. It's near impossible to hold everyone on the roster for an entire game because you've got guys up and down this thing that can give you bucket after bucket after bucket. And I know I'm talking here a lot about the offense. Let's go over to the other thing that I thought was impressive in this one, the second half defense. So we talked about how Kentucky in the first half gave up 50+% shooting to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was able to distribute the basketball quite a bit. In the second half, they shot 37.8%, 13% from 3, were 7 of 8 from the foul line, something that Vanderbilt does on offense, and it's about the only good thing that they do on offense is draw fouls and score points from the foul line. They only had 8 free throws. To be fair, Kentucky only had 3. Really low foul game from Pat Adams, which is something I did not think I would say about this officiating crew, about any SEC officiating crew for that matter. But Kentucky out-rebounded Vanderbilt. They had 15 assists to 3 assists in the second half. 11 personal fouls for Kentucky as opposed to Vanderbilt's 6. They really did not foul a whole lot, did the Commodores, but they also didn't play a lot of defense, to be fair. And then Vanderbilt had more turnovers than the Wildcats in the second half. And again, that really poor shooting performance does it epitomizes what this Jerry Stackhouse offense is. It's like for one moment, you can have really good shooting. Like you've got guys scoring in isolation. You got guys getting to the bucket, knocking down shots, going all over the place, playing with pace. And then they really slow things down and they bog down and they shoot really inefficiently. They shoot awful from deep and they don't draw fouls. And on top of this, they give up insane splits on defense. For instance, Kentucky in the second half shot 55% from the floor, was 5 of 11 from deep. Again, out-rebounded the Commodores, doubled them up in second chance points. Just you're not going to do what you need to do to win the game if you've got that combination of just like all of a sudden just falling flat on your face in the second half and then completely falling apart on defense. Kentucky for the game, just go over to total game stats here, 51% from the floor, 44% from three as opposed to Vanderbilt's 22, 8 of 9 from the foul line, had 10 turnovers, 13 points off turnovers, 44 total rebounds as opposed to Vanderbilt's 32, which is one of the largest rebounding margins I think I've seen from Kentucky this entire season. Had more second chance points. In fact, get this, Vanderbilt had 4 second chance points. Kentucky had 22. That may be one of the largest numbers I've seen all season, especially against a conference opponent. One of the largest numbers I've seen all season as well in this stat category, 56 bench points for UK as opposed to Vanderbilt's 13. Vandy had 48 points in the paint. Kentucky had 40. Both teams had 16 fast break points. Both teams had 4 steals, but 27 assists to 11 assists is kind of where things start and end. I think in my mind, it's just the fact that Kentucky could pass the rock around. Vanderbilt could not. They couldn't hit shots in isolation. Kentucky could. Rob Dillingham is absolutely insane. And Bob's your uncle. I mean, that's how this game ended. Kentucky just kind of took over at different points, getting layups and things, and Vanderbilt couldn't hit a shot. So, yeah, there's just not a whole lot to say about this one other than the fact that, yeah, it just doesn't really shock me. If you want to go over to KenPom, by the way, get some updates here on Kentucky's overall stats. They did not move in adjusted efficiency. They are still 94th nationally. Didn't move in offense either. Still 8th nationally in adjusted offense. So the Wildcats, statistically, didn't really budge in this game other than another conference win, and they've got one more they can try for here at the end of the regular season. Let's talk a little bit about that in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you want at the prices you need, it is easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. You can keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, wrapping up the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Going to talk here a little bit about the conference standings, how the season went for UK basketball. We got one more game, and it's going to be a very, very tough one that I right now don't think Kentucky's going to win. They've got a chance. Absolutely, they've got a chance to win this game. But it's going to be really tough. It's against a very hot opponent in the Tennessee Volunteers. 24-6, 14-4 in SEC play. Tennessee has won 7 straight games, including a big-time win on the road tonight against South Carolina. Again, Kentucky's got a chance to go as high as a 2 seed in the SEC if they win this game 13-5 in SEC play, and I think they would hold a tiebreaker. Yeah, they'd hold a tiebreaker both over Alabama and Auburn. And if South Carolina loses to Mississippi State, who is on the bubble right now, and is in desperate need of one more big-time win. South Carolina would then be the 3 seed. No, they would be the 5 seed in that scenario because they'd be 12 and 6, yeah. If Auburn and Bama won their final 2 games, which they're both going to, unless something completely falls apart for both those two teams. Arkansas and Georgia are terrible. So both the Tigers and the Crimson Tide should be 13 and 5. South Carolina is the question mark here, and that's kind of determining whether or not Kentucky gets in to that double bye or not. And I will just say this. If Kentucky doesn't get a double bye and they have to face a team as the 5 seed, I do not want to play Vanderbilt. I don't want to play. I cannot believe I am saying this. I don't want to play Vanderbilt in the SEC tournament. I just don't want to do it. I think Kentucky's done it like 3 freaking years in a row. I'm sick and tired of playing the Commodores. I'm tired of them making this competitive. I'm tired of this team making things competitive against us. And maybe that's the victory that Commodore fans needed. They just needed me to say that after UK wins on Senior Day. But yeah, I don't want to face Vanderbilt. Quite frankly, I don't want to face Arkansas, which would be, I think, 2 of your most likely matchups coming into that game as the 5 seed. As you'd probably be playing the Hogs or the Commodores, which does not bode well for my mental health. But here, again, if you can get a team like Ole Miss, or if you get one of these other top 4 seeds, I mean, Kentucky drilled Alabama. They routed Auburn in Neville Arena. It's like, I would much rather have the Tigers or the Tide, or even somebody like Mississippi State if they're coming out, even if it's Florida. Like, if somehow you meet Florida in the semifinals and it's like, okay, you know what? This is a team that's really good, but we can still beat them. I just don't. Just the magic of March. I want to stay away from some of these lower seeds that have given Kentucky problems. I don't want to touch it. To be fair, though, at the same time, we also need to talk about, and this, I'm probably going to do a whole episode on this, by the way. We need to talk about, like, how is Kentucky going to play at a neutral site in Nashville against some of these teams that they have struggled with? If they play a Vanderbilt, if they play an Arkansas, this team is so different from last year's. How is this one going to compare to last season's, who struggled at neutral site events? Because I think this team, if they really focus up, and I think they got that ceiling, they could beat the dog out of some of these teams. They could. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying they could. What's the focus look like, man? Whenever they're stepping in, if they get that 5 seed and they're like, okay, we don't have a double bye, we're gonna have to step up. I think at that point they would play the 2 or the 3 in the next round. If I'm not mistaken, we'll look at the bracket whenever it gets here on Sunday. But yeah, I am super fascinated to see how this ends for Kentucky. Win, and you're in that double bye. Lose, and you gotta hope South Carolina loses at Mississippi State. So we'll be monitoring those 2 games. Obviously, we'll do a preview episode and a recap of the Tennessee game later on this week. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. Subscribe to the podcast feed as well. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow this show on Twitter at LockedOnUK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.